I actually got this text this morning from a good friend. And I wonder, like, what's your reaction to this? It's speculative, but my friend said something, and he is not alone. He said, God, Steph must be so pissed. And I know this is where a lot of people's heads are right now. Wondering, is Steph pissed? Should he be pissed? He'll never say it publicly, but you know that he is, XYZ. This is interesting. Vince Goodwill, who does a lot for Yahoo through the years, Sirius XM. And if you remember, Vince Goodwill was the guy back at the Olympics a couple years ago that did the interview with Steph, where Steph certainly didn't insinuate that he wanted to leave, but I'm going to paraphrase. He said something along the lines of, like, no, it's always important to be competing. I'm not going to be okay with just cruising through the remainder of my career not trying to win. That was the tone of the interview, and this happened a couple years ago. And Vince was on the Hoops Collective podcast through ESPN and said this.
This whole 2 timeline garbage that they were trying to pull off, like, that's where all of this sort of stems from, is we're trying to plan ahead of Stephen Curry, as opposed to, hey man, let's see if we can maximize and make the best of this. Steph has never really threatened to go anywhere, and the Warriors know that, and that's why they've been able to do the things that they've been doing. If Steph kicked it a completely different way, then we will be having different conversations. I think this is the first salvo of, hey, don't take me for granted here.
Okay, so that's from Vince. Here's Shams on the Warriors, not just this offseason, but all of the big star efforts that they've made over the last half a year.
Let's take a look at their last 7 months and the pursuits that they've had. Go back to January and February. They offered 4 first-round picks for Giannis Antetokounmpo at the trade deadline. They missed out. And to be clear, at the NBA draft last month, the Celtics approached the Warriors on a deal that would have sent 4 first-round picks to Boston for Jaylen Brown. The Warriors spoke to the Celtics about that, but they passed on that deal. They did not want to trade those 4 first-round picks. Then during free agency, we've spoken about it. LeBron James and Anthony Davis were their targets. There was significant belief around the NBA that if they had gotten AD, that would have made them a solidified spot to land LeBron James. But that asking price for Anthony Davis, once all of this was known, was going to be astronomical. You're looking at multiple first-round picks, multiple swaps. Clearly, they did not want to go that threshold. They have wanted to maintain their assets, take a calculated approach to team building, because they're at the twilight of Stephen Curry's career, so you have to look at the now and the future.
Look, that's fair. Yes, you have to look at the now and in the future, and anybody who wants to criticize a team for doing that, I believe that you're wrong. Like, yes, you have to keep an eye on both. My question that I've been throwing out there today, and I don't know the way to sort of acquire the answer to this, but there's just a lot of indicators right now that would suggest that Joe Lacob is, in his heart of hearts, seems right now more interested, more activated by the future as opposed to the now. And I don't know. From my standpoint as a Warrior fan, that does not feel good.
It doesn't feel great, but at the same time, I would not want them to give up 4 first-round picks for Anthony Davis. I would not really want them to give up 4 first-round picks for Jaylen Brown. I mean, Jaylen Brown is a great player. He's younger than Anthony Davis. He's healthier than Anthony Davis, but that's a lot of first-round capital when you're going to be in a spot very soon, a year, 2 or 3, when you don't have Steph Curry and the dynasty will officially be over. The dynasty is already over, but the Steph Curry portion of it, he's still here. So I'm not that interested in doing something along those lines. Like, for example, right now I could go out and probably afford the down payment on a Ferrari. And I could make the monthly payments for a while, but that's not a very good, sensible play for me.
You're not going to whoop that? You whooped me because I took a dog to the groomer today? This guy says he can do the down payment on a Ferrari and you don't whoop him?
Sorry, there was other stuff.
You're going to whoop him.
So you go into your 401k and you liquidate it, and then you take that money and you put a down payment and you drive a Ferrari for 2 months and all the insurance and all the rest of it, and God forbid you park that thing anywhere, might get keyed or, dinged by a shopping cart, whatever. It's not a sensible move. That's the point. I'm not saying that 4 first-round picks for Jaylen Brown is akin to me buying a Ferrari, but it's not a sensible, sound play for the future.
No, I can hear that. I don't disagree with you. By the way, you're listening to 95.7 The Game, KGMZ FM and HD1 San Francisco, on Odyssey Sports Station, and the home of the Golden State Warriors and Valkyries, always live on the free Odyssey app and coming to you live from the Laughing Monk Studios. Again, my point is not that the Warriors should just be flippant, should just throw picks everywhere in the name of Steph Curry. They're just, for my taste, there's too many voices right now who I think have a line to Joe Lacob that seem to be expressing that the number one motivation of the Warriors organization right now is building an awesome winner in the post-Steph era. Yes, that needs to be a part of your thinking, but I don't want that to be your only thinking. And if I were Steph, that would really, yes, I want to leave the organization in a good spot. Like he said, I think he's super mature about the whole thing, but that would piss me off. If Kawakami's going to sit here and say, I think Joe Lacob is very motivated by building a winner after Steph to prove to everybody that he can, and Logan Murdoch is going to say the reason collectively that the Warriors did not trade for Jaylen Brown, whether that was February or 2 weeks ago, the reason that they didn't do that is because collectively they could not agree that Jaylen was going to be the one in 2030 when Steph's no longer here. Those quotes are all coming from the same place. Those quotes tell me, if accurate in their perspective, that Joe Lacob right now, the number one thing that's moving his needle is A, the future, but B, and here's what I really don't like about it, trying to prove something to the world. I've always felt like, because I've fallen into that trap, I just feel like that's a dangerous place to be. When you wake up in the morning and your motivation is, I got to prove myself. I got to show these people this, that, or the other. I don't know if that's what's driving Joe, but if it is, I'd say to Joe, you know what, dude? I think you won. I think your life is good. Relax. You don't need to prove anything to anybody. You built Chase Center, for God's sakes.
Right. But you know this about people who've gone from not a lot to being billionaires.
I know.
You always want to keep driving that, because how you went from where you were, and I don't know what Joe Lacob's upbringing was like. I understand that it was pretty much humble and not, from a millionaire or a billionaire, but you get to where you are, and you got there because you never give up the grind. And so you're not just going to get to a spot and say, I'm going to throw up my feet, I'm going to put my hands interlocked behind my head, and now I'm chilling.
For sure. But you can grind without it being about proving something to someone else. Why don't you just grind on your goals? You know what I mean? And
I think he is.
Maybe, and again, maybe those are the same thing. But I would think if I owned the Warriors and Steph Curry was on the team, that would still maintain the 1 seed in my heart while we're sitting here doing this. Not because I owe something to Steph, but certainly, if for no other reason, simply out of respect for everything that he's achieved and the player he still is. That's all. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that don't worry about the future till some other day. Sure, worry about it. Don't do a bad deal. But if this is really what's driving Joe right now, the idea of showing the world that he can actually be a great owner, and the Warriors can be a huge brand post-Steph, that I feel like we've arrived too early, if that's the case.
I agree with that part of it, but maybe they don't believe that Jaylen Brown is that guy. And so if the ask is for 4 first-round picks at the deadline for Jaylen Brown, and you give up Jimmy Butler, and you get Jaylen Brown, who's got 3 more years on his deal, if you're not a believer that he can be the guy, and even if he is the guy, well, then you're going to have to sign him beyond the Steph Curry era and give him 65, 70, 75 million, whatever that number is. I'm not sure if at that moment at the deadline last year, they were committed to, Jaylen Brown, you're the guy. And then I think the thing that is jarring for a lot of Warrior fans, and 888-957-9570, if you believe this or not, but you get to this offseason and Boston's able to give up just 2 first-round picks and, they get 2 first-round picks rather, and Paul George, you and I have a difference of opinion as to, what Paul George is worth. I think Paul George is still a viable, good, top 30 player in the NBA.
And but so is Jimmy Butler when he's back, so that you're really talking about...
if he's back.
Yeah, but you're talking about half a year. I mean, everything's
probably
speculative.
More than half a year, and Jimmy's coming off an ACL, and I think is he older than Paul George or the same age?
I think maybe a few months older.
Yeah, it's not even that important for the conversation. But if you're Boston, you probably are more interested in somebody who can play right away, and that's Paul George. And so you take the 2 picks. But I think a lot of fans see what Boston got back and think, why weren't you in on it? Even if it was 3 first-round picks and Jimmy Butler, could you have done that?
That's a fair question. I don't know.
And I don't even know if they tried.
Right. I know that there's that narrative out there that the Warriors never countered. I don't know if that's true. But if they just were like Jimmy Butler and 4 first rounders, the Warriors like, no thanks, we don't even want to talk to you. I think that's a miss.
Agreed.
You know what I mean? Or do you circle back last month when Jaylen Brown was actually traded and see, has the price come down? Because it appears to me, no matter what you think about Paul George, the price came down. Jimmy and 4 first rounders is a bigger ask than Paul George and 2 first rounders. That's a bigger ask.
Right.
So the price came down. And clearly it came down because Paul George and 2 ones ended up being the one they took, which means nobody in the NBA beat that offer. I wonder, if you did say Jimmy and 3 ones, is that a better offer than Paul and 2 ones? I think it is. If you're team building.
Well, it depends on where those ones are. And I would bet that any conversation that Mike Dunleavy had involved the number 11 pick, which turned out to be Yaxel Lendeborg.
Oh, sure.
So if I'm a team, for example, Boston, and, I want to hear your offer about, okay, Jimmy Butler and 3 firsts. Well, I want this year's first because this draft, everyone says, is one of the best ever.
I'm trying to remember, though, the Jaylen Brown deal, that was after the draft? Was the Jaylen Brown deal after the draft?
I think so. I'll look it up, but
I think it was. I think it was after the draft. So the Yaxel, you could ask for Yaxel.
Right.
But that Philly didn't have to give up anything out of this year's draft. They gave up future draft capital. And Boston, did they want to do a deal with Philly? Look what they did. Look what Boston just did. They built a behemoth with their rival. I would imagine there would be a little bit of a, hey, we'd rather do a deal with the Warriors. Let's get Jaylen Brown out of the conference, out of our area.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. It was official July 6th. So, yeah, that was pretty far after the draft. And so, yeah. And you get a couple of picks in the future. They get the 2028 and the 2031 picks. So
that's not that great of a deal. I don't feel like that's that great of a deal for Boston. And that was what I said to Grandy that day when it broke. One of my concerns is almost why didn't anybody in the NBA beat that deal? What does everybody know about Jaylen Brown that made him seemingly less attractive than we all think he is, especially because now he ended up being a conduit to LeBron James?
Right. Yep.
That in and of itself ups his value, whether he plays well or not. So I'm still confused by that whole thing.
And I wonder if we will ever find out about the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Boston Celtics front office part of it, because it just felt like they were in a spot where they needed to trade him. And the one that really still scratches my head is the Luka Doncic out of Dallas. It didn't seem like that was a broken relationship other than, as soon as they traded him, the reports came out about, the weight and maybe beer and cigarettes and all the rest of it. And even if that's true, beer, cigarettes, and he's heavy, the dude's still bald.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about?
Luka. Yeah.